You are not alone in the dark. This is Mr. Mysterious. Tonight's story is I was awake for 18 days. Listen if you dare. Let's start.
I've been awake for 18 days. It's not some dramatic flair, not a joke. I mean it. 18 straight days without a second of sleep. No winks. Not a single moment of rest. The craziest part is, I don't feel tired. I have no idea how I'm even functioning. The last few weeks have been a waking nightmare, and I have a gut feeling it's only going to get worse. It all started on the eve of my final exams. Finals week is always a special kind of hell, and even though I'd spent all of November studying, the pressure was still crushing me. There's just something fundamentally wrong with a considerable chunk of your final grade depending on a single test. I'd been in bed for 3 hours, just tossing and turning. My mind was a carousel of frustrated thoughts, unable to let myself drift into that beautiful, glorious world of slumber. The clock read 4 a.m., and my next final was at 8 a.m. Finally, I'd had enough. I threw the covers off and decided to pull an all-nighter. I figured staying up was better than getting a pathetic 2 hours of sleep and then waking up to my alarm feeling even more miserable. I got dressed, sighed, and stepped out into the warm, thick Florida night. As expected, the campus library was buzzing with desperate energy. They were always open 24/7 during this cursed time. The building was eerily still. A student with the graveyard shift sat at the information desk, staring blankly into a screen, her head not even twitching as I walked by. A few other students were scattered around, looking like zombies with coffee cups in one hand and laptops in the other. Some even had a slice of pizza resting on the table in front of them. It was a typical scene. In the center of the lobby, a beautifully draped table held 2 large metallic coffee dispensers. Next to them was a basket of paper cups, along with creams, sugars, and sweeteners. The school had a long-standing tradition of providing free coffee during finals week, a nice gesture, I guess, for the sea of stressed-out students. I've never been a coffee drinker. I despise the taste. But it was 4 a.m., and I had a whole night ahead of me. I caved and filled a small paper cup, loading it with so much cream you probably couldn't even call it coffee anymore. With my courage in a cup, I headed up to the computer lab on the 3rd floor. I found an empty computer, logged in, and pulled up my professor's presentation. I practically chugged the entire cup in one go. The taste was what you'd expect, but the texture was all wrong. As the hot liquid slid down my throat, I felt a strange, rough grit pass over my tongue. It was like little tiny pellets were suspended in the fluid, a lot like cottage cheese, but almost unnoticeable. I didn't think much of it then. I figured it was just some weird additive from the school's cheap coffee brand. I glanced into the empty cup, but there was nothing. Unusual, so I quickly forgot about it. I was about to go for another cup when the caffeine hit, and I mean it hit. It was a jolt of insane, shocking power. My heart started throbbing in my chest, and a rush of energy slammed into me. I felt like I had just woken up from a full 10 hours of glorious sleep. There was this long-running joke at my school that the coffee was laced with jet fuel, and now I understood exactly why. I decided not to go for a second cup. I think I would have gone into cardiac arrest. I kept studying until the sun began to peek over the horizon at 7 a.m. Stepping outside into the crisp morning air, I still felt wide awake, the artificial pounding in my chest being the only sign that something wasn't right. For a moment I understood why people were so obsessed with coffee. I thought maybe I should do this more often. The caffeine didn't wear off until around 2 p.m. It was like somebody flipped a switch. The energy just vanished, and I crashed. My body demanded payment for the all-nighter, and I felt like a ton of bricks had been dropped on me. I decided to head back to my bed and try to sleep off the all-nighter. I knew I couldn't be out for too long. I had more finals in the morning, but even the thought of those exams made a cold dread settle in my stomach again. No matter how much he'd studied, a solid 40% of my grade depended on a subject I just couldn't figure out. A mild anxiety, a familiar companion during test weeks, started to rise. I tossed and turned in my bed for about 30 minutes, drowning in that pit of worry, when suddenly, a very strange thing happened. My sleepiness, the overwhelming exhaustion that had hit me just moments ago, simply vanished. It was completely gone. I blamed it on the panic and the adrenaline, splashed some cold water on my face, and even took a hot shower to calm myself down, but it didn't help. 2 hours passed, still nothing. It didn't make sense. It was as if the crash had just ended. Since sleep wasn't coming, I figured I might as well get more work done. The thought of my upcoming final was enough to keep me at my desk until 11 p.m. that night, and still, I didn't feel tired, not even a little. I spent hours lying in bed, begging myself to fall asleep, but it was useless. That's when I finally gave in to my fear. I grabbed my phone and did a quick Google search on how long caffeine is supposed to last. Most results pointed to 4 to 6 hours, with 12 hours being the most extreme estimate. It had already been far longer than that. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself that maybe I was just incredibly sensitive to caffeine and that the effects would eventually wear off. I was wrong. It was 4 a.m. again, and I was still wide awake, with the same unsettling energy coursing through my veins. I decided to pull another all-nighter, but this time, I made sure to stay far away from the cursed coffee. I went to the final the next morning, feeling annoyed that I would pay for this lack of sleep later in the day. But nothing changed. I still didn't feel the need to sleep. That's when the concern turned to outright fear. Was there something wrong with me? I called my mom to ask for her advice. She was equally worried and suggested I go to the university's health center. The best they could do was give me some medication, hoping it would help. It didn't. Not only did the medication have no effect, but as I lay awake for hours, a cold sweat started to trickle down my skin. It began subtly, then became so intense my sheets were soaked. My head began to throb with a piercing, screaming headache. It felt like I'd been shot. Then, there was another kind of thumping. Inside my head, a tiny, subtle, and irregular tapping began. I focused on it, and I could feel it slowly move from one side of my forehead to the other, then around the back of my skull. It felt like something was crawling. That was the line. I was done. Enough was enough. I decided I was calling a real doctor the next day. I did, but the best they could offer was an appointment in 2 weeks. Great. All praise the healthcare system, I guess. I accepted it, hoping things wouldn't get any worse. They did. The next day, my mom nearly gasped when she saw me on FaceTime. She said I looked paler than snow. I had to agree. In the middle of our conversation, a sudden wave of extreme nausea hit me. I gagged, hung up the phone, and ran to the bathroom just in time to empty my stomach. For the next hour, I sat there, retching, as the headache and that bizarre tapping continued to circle around my brain. And if that wasn't bad enough, as I was bent over the toilet, I swore I saw something move in the corner of my eye. It was quick, just a flicker, but it looked like an elongated black shape slowly crawling up the bathroom wall. I didn't get a good look at it before it seemed to vanish. I searched the entire place, top to bottom, but there was no sign of it. That was the final straw. I was definitely hallucinating, even though I still felt wide awake. I didn't care anymore. I couldn't wait 2 weeks for an appointment. So, without any other options, I picked up the phone and dialed 911. The paramedics arrived within minutes. I was a mess. After seeing how terrible I looked and listening to my frantic explanation, they quickly put me on a stretcher and rushed me to the local hospital. The 2-hour wait in the emergency room was pure misery. I was stuck on a cheap plastic chair in a cold, brightly lit room, surrounded by people suffering from God knows what. My symptoms only worsened with every passing minute. My vision was getting hazy, and I kept seeing things darting in my peripheral vision, that same strange, elongated shape I saw in my bathroom. Finally, a doctor called my name. He introduced himself as Dr. Eris and led me to a new room. He went through the typical questions. How are you feeling, Alex Terrible? Have you taken any drugs recently? Just some over-the-counter sleep meds. They didn't work. Any caffeinated beverages recently? I paused. I had a shot of coffee. But that was 4 days ago. Dr. Eris hummed, his expression thoughtful. Okay, well, that shouldn't be causing this. Honestly, Alex, I'm not sure what's going on. We'll run a few tests to hopefully find an answer. If we can't, we'll have to keep you here overnight to perform a sleep test. I snorted. A sleep test. Right. The initial tests came back frustratingly perfect. My blood pressure, heart rate, and every other vital sign were completely normal. Nothing was wrong with me, at least on paper. The doctor informed me that they'd be proceeding with the sleep examination that night. I was taken to a room that looked more like a hotel room than a hospital, with a large window and a cozy-looking bed. After hooking me up to a confusing array of equipment, Dr. Eris smiled. All right, you're all set up. Don't worry, we'll be watching from the room next door. Just ask if you need anything. He handed me a couple of pills. One more thing. This is Silenor, an insomnia medication. It's much stronger than what you had before. Hopefully, this works. I swallowed the pills, and he left the room, plunging me into a thick, overbearing silence, broken only by the gentle hum of the machines. I eased my head back into the pillow and closed my eyes, desperately hoping to finally get some sleep. The bed was incredibly comfortable. In any other situation, I would have been out in minutes. But now, nothing. 1 hour passed, 2 hours. I was getting frustrated. The medication wasn't working. I just lay there, staring into the darkness, holding my eyes shut. Then, around midnight, it happened. The quiet tapping inside my head returned, and it went into overdrive. It was no longer in one spot. It was everywhere, tapping across the entire circumference of my skull all at once. I could almost hear it inside me, a tiny, unsettling sound like crinkling paper. I shot up into a sitting position, clutching my head in pain. My eyes had adjusted to the darkness, and the room was no longer pure black, but filled with shadowy, twisting forms in the corners. The nausea returned, and stars exploded across my vision. Then I heard it, a soft, crackling noise coming from a dark corner to my left. It was a smooth, slow, slithering sound. I stared into the darkness. A terror like nothing had ever felt before rising in my chest. Partially illuminated by the glow of the machinery, I saw it. Tucked away where the left and back walls met was a slim, black, elongated shape. But it wasn't a tube. As I stared, I realized it had hundreds of tiny legs, all squirming and latching onto the surface in perfect unison with the noise. The creature slowly crawled its way upward, its long body wriggling in perfect harmony. It paid me no attention as it made its way towards the ceiling. Frozen in fear, I could only watch. After a few seconds, I launched myself off the bed and screamed, ripping the equipment down from where it stood, sending a loud crash echoing through the room. The doctors stormed into the room, flipping on the harsh lights. They demanded to know what had happened. I was hysterical, my head pounding as if my brain was trying to claw its way out of my skull. There's something in the corner, I screamed, pointing. But as I looked back, the space was empty. The shadowy form, the hundreds of squirming legs, all of it was gone. Dr. Eris looked at me, his face filled with concern. Alex, how long did you say you were awake? For it's very common for severe sleep deprivation to cause hallucinations. His words made sense, but what I had seen felt so terrifyingly real. The doctors informed me that the sleep test was canceled. My little outburst had broken the equipment strapped to me. They decided to move me to a standard hospital room while they reviewed the data they had already collected. They hadn't even wheeled me 5 feet down the hallway when I started gagging again, and the polished hospital floor was soon greeted with a pristine coating of what I had just consumed. As I sat there, exhausted and humiliated, I finally got a good look at the substance that had come out of me. It was filled with what looked like tiny black spheres. I didn't know what to make of it, and frankly, I was more worried about other things. but I noticed that it seemed to stun the doctors for a moment too. They quickly regained their composure and escorted me away, leaving the mess behind. In my new, less comfortable hospital bed, I finally had a chance to look at my phone. It was filled with panicked messages from my mother, Alina. I called her back, and the second she saw the hospital bed behind me, she burst into tears. "What happened?" she cried. I explained everything: the nausea, the 911 call, the failed sleep test. She decided she would book a flight to come and help me. It was a small comfort, but it was enough. At least I wouldn't be facing this alone anymore. Our conversation was interrupted by Dr. Aris, who came in and sat down with a heavy sigh. He was holding a couple of sheets of paper. "Hey, Alex," he said, his voice grim. "We've been reviewing your sleep test data as promised, and, well..." He showed me a graph with a long, jagged line. "Your brain waves are highly irregular." "Look here," he said, tracing the line with his finger. "They're much more active than they should be, and they almost go off the graph when you had your episode." I stared at him in silence, my mind racing. "One thing's for sure, we need to get a head CT done as soon as possible," he said, his voice now a low whisper. "I'll see when I can get you in for an appointment." I could barely utter okay before he left the room. It was all a nightmare. I had no idea why this was happening, and it seemed like the world-class doctors were just as lost as I was. I just wanted it all to end. I just wanted to sleep. But a deep sense of dread told me my prayers were falling on deaf ears. A few hours later, Dr. Aris returned and escorted me to the CT examination room. I lay down on the little bed, feeling a certain amount of dread. I knew this was a normal procedure, but something about it was terrifying. Dr. Aris and his team watched from the control room. The machine began to hum, and I was slowly wheeled inside. After just 5 seconds, I heard a sudden commotion from the control center. One of the assistants ran out of the room. My heart began to pound. Dr. Aris approached me, a horrified expression on his face. "Listen, Alex, normally CT scan results take weeks, but we've seen something here that needs to be addressed now." He ushered me to the computer screen and pointed at the image. I nearly gasped. It was a picture of my head, but wrapped around my brain was a long, bug-like creature. It looked like a giant millipede, but with a thicker, fleshier body and 2 big antennae. And it looked exactly like the creature from my hallucinations. I felt sick to my stomach, but this time it wasn't the illness. My heart lurched in my chest as I stared at the unnerving image. "What the hell?" I exclaimed. "Yeah," Dr. Aris said, his voice flat. "I have no idea where this came from, but we're going to have to get it out of you pretty fast." I could only nod, completely lost in my thoughts. This passenger had been inside me all this time. Was that what I felt when I experienced that tapping? Was it that thing crawling around in my head? As if on cue, it started again. I focused on it, and I could feel all those little legs skittering along my brain. I dissolved into a blind panic, and that only seemed to make it pick up the pace. It almost seemed excited. My headache returned with a vengeance, and I collapsed to the ground, my fear briefly forgotten by the searing pain. Dr. Aris looked at me with a concerned expression. "Look, Alex, I'll try to schedule surgery to get it removed as soon as possible. Until then, just try not to think about it too hard." "Okay." Don't think about it too hard. It was a ridiculous thing to say. How was I supposed to go back to my room and pretend that something wasn't literally living inside my skull? My terror got worse as I was ushered back to my room. I still felt it. The constant, frantic skittering of 1,000 tiny legs. The moment I got back to my bed, my symptoms flared up again. I ran to the bathroom, retching violently. The substance that came out of me filled with those bizarre black spheres. This time, as I stared at the dark pellets in the toilet, a cold dread finally settled. They looked like eggs, but I didn't have time to fully process the thought. I weakly got up to wash my hands, and that's when I saw it. In the mirror, slightly above my eyebrows, was what looked like a massive bulge. It was long, a winding bug-like cylinder that circled my entire head. I could even see pieces of my hair slightly displaced by its shape as it moved beneath my scalp. I have no idea what came over me. All my fear, my worry, my terror, it all vanished. My right hand began to drift up towards my head as if it had a mind of its own. I would say I tried to stop it, but that would be a lie. It was almost like a trance, a complete mental blankness. My arm hovered up towards the bulge, and then I touched it. I squeezed gently. It was soft, almost like a sponge, but I didn't have time to register the sensation. The thing immediately squirmed away, darting out of view behind my head at a speed that looked like a bullet fired from a gun. That was what finally ripped me from my state. I screamed, leaping back and nearly splitting my head on the bathroom tiles. I sat there on the floor, breathing heavily, hyperventilating. After a moment, I worked up the courage to look back into the mirror. It was gone. I did a full 360-degree turn to check every angle, but it wasn't there anymore. My headache intensified once again, and I ran to my bed, curling up in the fetal position, tears streaming down my face. I remained like that for hours. The doctors came in to check on me, but after I explained what I had seen, they found nothing. Their presence helped calm me down, but the image of what I had seen on the CT scan and what had just happened in that bathroom haunted me. No matter how hard I tried, I simply could not get it out of my head. I just lay there staring at the ceiling. I don't think I could have slept even if this bizarre condition wasn't a factor. My mom arrived the next morning. I explained everything to her, and she was understandably just as freaked out as I was, but she relaxed a bit when I told her about the doctor's plan to surgically remove what was now being called a parasite. A few minutes later, my neurosurgeon, with a team of doctors, an assistant, and my anesthesiologist, came in and told my mom to wait outside. With one last hug, we said goodbye. "Don't worry. I'm going to take good care of you," my anesthesiologist said, preparing the machine. Bright, blinding lights blazed to life above me as the doctors laid out their tools. The sight of all the sharp objects gave me a small pit in my stomach, even though I knew I wouldn't be feeling any of it. They stuck an IV into my arm and hooked me up to the monitors. I listened to the steady, rhythmic beeping of my heartbeat as I stared into the piercing lights. "Okay, Alex," Dr. Evelyn Cross smiled. "I'm going to place this mask on your face. I want you to count down from 10 in your head. You'll be asleep before you reach 0. We'll wake you up after the first part of the surgery is done." She gently placed the mask over my nose, and as the chemicals streamed into me, I did as she requested. I tried not to think about waking up with an open skull. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. I reached the end of my countdown. I was still awake. A wave of panic rose in my chest. I tried to speak, to get up, but I couldn't. I was completely paralyzed, locked in place, unable to even wiggle my fingers. My heart began to pound faster, the beeping on the monitor beside me accelerating. Dr. Evelyn Cross, seeing something was wrong, said, "Hez awake. Don't start yet. I'm going to increase the dosage." She turned a dial, and an intense surge of the drug was pushed into the mask. My paralysis grew stronger, but I still wasn't falling asleep. Dr. Evelyn Cross swore under her breath, turning the dial up even more, but nothing was working. I lay there, trapped, as the doctors hovered over me, their faces a blur of concern. Suddenly, the lights above me went out. The room went completely dark. All the doctors blurred into the sides of my vision, still and unmoving. The frantic sound of machinery was replaced by a complete and utter silence. I lay there, hyperventilating. That tapping inside my head began to scurry again, rushing and crawling all over my brain. It was an incredibly disgusting sensation, and it just wouldn't stop. Then a new sound crept through the silence. A soft, crackling noise came from the foot of my bed. It was slowly getting closer, like tiny micro-taps on the plastic. Soon, 2 small antennas became visible, peering through the darkness. The head arrived next. It was here, The same creature I had seen on the CT scan, only much larger now. It worked its way up the bed, slithering onto my foot. I tried to move, to run, but the drug had me trapped. It crawled up my body, 1,000 tiny legs pushing against my skin. It was slow and deliberate, wrapping its way around my limbs. It looked like a giant millipede, but with a fleshy, pale body and a pattern of black marks. It reached my stomach and made a beeline for my face. I tried to hold my head back, but it was useless. As the last bit of its body crossed the bed frame, its head reached my chin. Its long antennas touched my skin, and I realized my mask was gone. I don't know when it disappeared, but it was gone, giving the thing an opening. It used its tiny front legs to pry my mouth open with a strength I couldn't believe it had. I gagged as it began to crawl inside. I felt every movement of its tiny legs creeping onto my tongue, the fleshy mass rubbing against the top of my mouth. I wanted to throw up, to cough, to do anything. But those reflexes weren't working. All I could do was gag as its long, segmented body maneuvered its way inside. Its head reached the back of my throat, and I felt it begin to work its way up towards my skull. As more and more of its body disappeared behind my lips, I saw more of them. Smaller creatures appeared, weaving their way towards me, crawling all over my body. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for the nightmare to end. Then, the lights blared back on, and I shot up shrieking, flailing my arms. I nearly smacked Dr. Evelyn Cross's hand as she tried to calm me down. "Easy, easy," she said. I realized the creatures were gone. It was just me and the doctors in the room, my heartbeat monitor beeping at a frantic pace. The mask was on the bedside table. I instantly collapsed into tears, begging for my mother, Elena. "We're going to have to try something else," one doctor said. "Removing it isn't going to work if we can't get him under." I nearly tackled my mom when I saw her again, explaining everything about the horrible experience in the operating room. Dr. Aris came in a few minutes later, his expression grim. "Okay, Alex, I'm sorry about what you just went through," he said. "For now, we've decided to give you some anti-parasitic medication to see if that helps. I hate to tell you this, but we're a little lost right now. You've been infected with a species we've never seen before, so we're going to bring in some researchers to better understand your condition." My mother, Elena, immediately stood up in protest. "You are not going to run experiments on my son." Dr. Aris looked at her calmly. "They aren't experiments, ma'am. We just need to study the best course of action to kill or get this parasite out of him. And besides, it's Alex's choice." They both looked at me. I desperately wanted this thing as far away from me as humanly possible, so with nothing left to lose, I accepted. For the next 7 days, my condition didn't get much better. I had been awake for 13 days at this point, but it was strange. Despite how horrible I felt, I still didn't need to sleep. The parasite was constantly stimulating my body. I requested to spend my nights with my mom, and her presence helped put me at ease. We even started to laugh about it all a little. Mysteriously, my hallucinations became less severe, which the researchers quickly picked up on. My constant tests and scans showed that the anti-parasitic medication was having no effect. A researcher came in the next day and told me he had a new theory. My symptoms seemed to calm down when I was at ease and flared up when I was stressed or scared. He proposed giving me a high dose of medication to regulate my stress hormones. I tried it for 2 days, and the results confirmed their theory. My symptoms weakened significantly, and a subsequent CT scan revealed the thing had shriveled into a husk of what it used to be. It was starving. The parasite was feeding off my stress hormones. They continued this pattern until my symptoms were almost non-existent. The thing on the CT scan looked like a tiny, withered corpse. Dr. Aris came in and delivered a message that almost made my stomach drop. Given how weak the thing had become, he wanted to try the surgery again. I was eager to be done with this, but I didn't want to relive that last time. He assured me they would start with a very low dose, and if it didn't work, they would immediately call off the operation. After a long debate, we decided to proceed. Thankfully, the surgery went off without a hitch. When I came to, I finally saw the thing that had caused me all this trouble. It was dead, lying on a tray beside the bed. It looked like what I had seen in my hallucinations, but much smaller. I even got to name the damn thing. Neural sleep parasite had a nice ring to it. They took it away for further study, and I never saw it again. They explained that I had most likely ingested its eggs when I drank that coffee, and the high stress of my finals allowed it to hatch and take over my brain. But I cut them off. I was done. A few hours later, I was released from the hospital. I know I probably should have let my mom drive, but I was so desperate to get back to a normal life. I got into my car and drove back to my apartment. I regretted it immediately. The past 18 days of no sleep hit me like a truck. The parasite was gone, and now my brain was demanding I pay up for the debt I had built up. Without realizing it, I started to doze off at the wheel. My mom's shrill scream was the only thing that stopped us from slamming into an 18-wheeler. I pulled over immediately and let my mom take the wheel, realizing my stupid mistake. She drove me the rest of the way home. Upon arriving at my apartment, I immediately made plans to dive into bed. It was time to catch up on 18 days of lost sleep. Or so I thought, because immediately after I jumped under the covers, my tiredness vanished. I began to panic, forcing myself to think clearly. They said I ingested its eggs with the coffee. What if there was more than one? Or what if it had laid more while it was inside me? Those black spheres coming out of me. I just never thought to bring it up. I'm writing this now with a piercing headache, as all of my symptoms are rushing back. I think I just felt something crawl under my skull.